Good afternoon, Scott Baker. Good to see you.
Mikey, good to see you. Thanks everybody for joining us for another edition of Lead Better, our chance to talk about today's field note from Admired Leadership. We got a cool title for this one. It's kind of part of I would say it's a part two of a two-part, but it's been a little bit of a theme lately in some regards. But the title is this: Call Out and Get Curious about a team member's improvement. So call out and get curious. Here we are. And it does build nicely on yesterday's, which I'm going to give you also the title, Beyond Praise, Why the Best Leaders Use Higher Forms of Recognition. So recognition and how we give recognition is the leadership superpower here that is more than just saying, hey, good job, or that was really great.
Yes. And for leaders who have the tendency to not be very good at giving praise, because a lot of high performers are very praise stingy because they know what excellence looks like. So as a result, they have a tendency to hold back praise because it goes against it. It grates on them to hand it out too easily, right? So here's a nice alternative. And we talked about it yesterday, and you're right. This dovetails perfectly. Recognition is the alternative that a lot of praise stingy leaders need to be able to constantly be calling out what they see as good improvements. Now, again, a lot of times the leader would be like, I don't want to give you praise because you're not at that standard yet, right? You're currently operating at a 3, and I need you at a 10 before I start handing out praise.
So this one you can enter anywhere on the spectrum.
Yes. So how do I phrase it that it doesn't sound like I'm violating my principles of only recognizing excellence by calling out when you've moved from a 2 to a 3? Sure, you could do that.
You don't use those numbers. Don't be like, you really sucked, and now you suck slightly less.
Yes. When I was a kid, it was the award ceremony. It was the most improved player. You had the MVP, right? You had the most inspirational player, right? But then there was one of those awards that was always handed out to all the JV and varsity teams called most
guy
improved
we picked last
player. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And so most improved is not necessarily, it wasn't the award you ever wanted to get because it meant you moved from a 2 to a 3. And so how do you hand out a most improved by maintaining its importance?
And the way that you mark that and the way it's used in the field notes, not how you use it in the conversation, is statements of progress. Now, so yesterday when we were talking about how recognition and telling somebody, hey, you belong, what you're doing matters, you're part of us, that's more important than just saying attaboy, right? So here and I'll come back around to this, but there's a certain kind of leader that's like a good job and they're like a fired up kind of person. The leaders like this can lean in all kinds of ways to say, I'm going to call it out, but then I'm going to get curious. Like, I'm not even sure why you're making this progress. So the key is saying, first of all, the statement of progress. You've really been doing better at this, or it's amazing what I've seen and how you've grown in this area. Right. And then the person may respond to that, but then the magic comes as you kind of then take that to say, well, what's been going on? What have you been trying differently? How did this come to be? Sometimes the person won't even have an immediate answer, which is terrific because now you have a place to have a conversation.
Right. And there's all kinds of reasons why you want them talking early in this kind of conversation as well. And so being able to phrase it in such a way where you ask them, but then, this key part that we say after we go through the recognition, that the best leaders go this one step further and say, tell me why that is, right? Why it works so well is because we mentioned yesterday that it's about taking something that might be external motivation and bringing it and turning it into intrinsic motivation. This is where this shows up. You saying, internalize that feedback, right? Of the fact that you're improving. You've moved from a 2 to a 3. So what is it in the last 2 weeks that you've done differently? What is it that has marked for this improvement? And then you shut up, right?
Yeah,
you let the person talk. That does a lot of great things.
Well, I had a conversation over the weekend with somebody where they gave an exact illustration of this happening. I wasn't actually asking, hey, have you read field notes? Can you tell me about a time when you got some recognition? And in this case, I was at an event where a friend of mine was speaking, and and that the guy that was speaking is a terrific. He's a mythologist. He's world class in storyteller, folklore expert, and so there were a couple hundred people there. And afterwards, I happened to run into a guy that I met one time before, and he said, "Hey, were you at that thing?" And I said, "Yeah." And we started talking, and we had a good conversation. And he'd been following the work of my friend, and he was telling me that in the law firm where he works, he had a conversation with one of the kind of whoever. I don't know how they work in law firms. Like you kind of check in once. It's sort of like the year end review. How are you doing? Where are you growing? And all of that. And there was a little bit of this, like, well, what's the unique thing? Like, where you seem to be getting this kind of traction with clients, and what, and this and that. And so my friend, new friend, kind of contemplated for a second. He said, maybe because of the environment we were in, but this is what he had said prior to this. He said, "I think I'm just a really good storyteller." And the guy goes, "That's it." Right. And then now I don't know whether he got curious at that point, but there's a lot of lawyers who get bogged down in the argument, the data, the little point that they're going to have to kind of lean in on, and this language and all of that. It's very rare that somebody can synthesize this and say, kind of seems like this is what's going on. Why don't we do this? And then they can arc it in a narrative where people, even in complex business circumstances or all kinds of, he was telling me some of them, he can cut through the clutter and just say, "Here's how it is." And they go, right. "Oh," and then they relax. And
now,
then
was the solution was the event that you actually saw him at, was that a storytelling kind of conference?
Yeah, it was just an evening presentation in which that was part of it, right? But this had happened prior, like this had been prior to that evening. So, but he'd already been somebody drawn to this idea, which is probably part of why he was there. So he was identifying one of the things that was helping him really make progress in his field, right? And so then the fact that the leader's like, what's the difference here? What's your unique thing? How have you been making this? That curiosity got that level of him going, "Yeah, of course you are." Right. Mm-hmm. And then if you were a good leader, be like, we all say that. We all, it's easy to say storyteller. And then, right. But what does that look like? What does that mean? Yes. And so then if you kind of lean in a little bit and you kind of say, where did that come from? How do you get better at that? Then you start to kind of unpack somebody's sort of unique skill set. Now, sometimes they'll know. A lot of times, and we've found this in Admired Leadership, even if you get a world-class expert and you say, "What is really unique about the thing that you do that's like makes you world-class?" Sometimes they won't even know. They've just gone around the day in, day out, almost drudgery of becoming masters at the thing that they're exceptional at. And sometimes we have to point it out to them. Very often, in fact.
Right. So Randall tells the story of going fishing with a friend who is one of these world-class guys. And after, a day worth of him describing, "What are you looking at here? What do you see?" Randall is able to distill it and finally says, like, "Oh, I think everything that you said today is just an example that you fish edges." And the guy is like, "I guess you're right."
Bridget, yes. Yeah. Right.
I've never thought about it that way, but that's exactly what I do. Yeah. We'll fast forward the rest of the story.
Here's where the ripple of the water changes. Here's where the light. Yeah.
That guy, I've heard Randall tell the story recently. That guy uses that all the time now.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the fact that he fishes edges and now he incorporated that into his actual teaching of other people how to fish is exactly what he uses all the time now. But he didn't even consider it until Randall helped to kind of distill it for him. Now, we make a point here in the field note that because the example that we just gave made it feel like real development happens when an expert comes in and tells you what you're looking at. But that's not the point of this field note at all. The point of this field note is
correct.
Start thinking about what it is that you're doing, asking the questions, getting the curiosity there, that recognition, and then why is that comes right after that is an important thing that you have happen so that a person can really start to internalize it themselves. Because most leadership development, we think of it as it being done to people. It's a training that they're going to. And frankly, most leadership development doesn't work. Right?
Right, very much. Yeah, and in fact, the field note puts that exact point by saying it's done to people, not by them. And here they're the part of their own process, and now they own it.
Yes. And I think that's why the question is phrased. And the more you can do that, it's the way a good therapist worked. Not that you as a leader
Hmm.
need to be a therapist, but you are taking advantage of the idea that if you really want buy-in from somebody, it needs to be their own, right? So the real question is on this idea of motivating and inspiring people is how do you inculcate ideas in a way that it feels like it's their thing, not
Hmm.
something that
Right.
you reveal to them. So never brag about the idea that, I was the one who told you about that. Remember, I was the one who said you're fishing edges, right? Like that's
Yeah.
not the point of the story at all. The point is that sometimes you don't recognize the things, think about them, ask the questions as a leader, and maybe those are the things that become
Right.
self-discovery among your team. And then it's the powerful change that can take place.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, I keep thinking about the edges that I think they were pointing out because it could be a physical edge, it could be the dividing time between at dusk and at
Right.
dawn. All of these things are even in storytelling. They talk about being hinge dwellers, right? You're at these
Yes.
moments, these particular moments, and of severance and threshold and return, and all of these things, kind of play into that. And what
Right.
the interesting thing is. And we talked about this yesterday. And of course, I know everybody that might be listening or watching is like, of course, Sunday afternoon, of course. Yeah, we don't miss that. We're there.
Yeah.
But if you did, you could go back. The field note itself was very good, but talked about this idea that motivation, it's very hard for a leader to actually, if you don't care, come in and make you care. Like none
Yes.
of us have been able to really have that happen with our kids, much less our coworkers. And so
Yes.
but what you can try to do is sort of fan the flames, help amplify, get obstacles out of the way of things that are inside a person and make
Yeah.
those things really come to life. And that's what today in the field note, it kind of says, it calls this leaders who move beyond praise and recognition by starting an internal fire of reflection. How
Hmm.
did you get so good at this? Help people grow in ways that only they can best harness. And that's just really a fantastic thing because now it's not only a process I own, but you've actually started to build and fuel an identity in me that I become inseparable with.
Yes. If you were a leader and you had a task and you were struggling with it and your whole team seemed to be struggling with wrapping their minds around
Mm-hmm.
how to actually execute on it, what you'd really want to create is you want your team to have epiphanies,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so now
A
you're
couple of
like,
ahas. Yeah.
yeah. So now you're like, oh, okay, I need to create epiphanies. And if you go about creating epiphanies by like trying to force them into it, like we're all going to get into the epiphany machine today. It's like if you created a process
Yeah.
that really did result in people having epiphanies, it
Yeah.
would feel like a lot of room, space,
Very
time,
true. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's what we're
Yeah.
doing by these questions. You're asking questions in such a way that create room for
Oh,
epiphanies to
crap.
take place.
I had a whole plan to have an epiphany cubicle, and now I've got to scrap that. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Now there
Yeah.
might be something about the epiphany cubicle where you go inside and actually
Right.
does create,
Yeah.
but mostly it's probably the space that you're giving people in their day to actually be in solitude for a while. There's nothing
Yes. Right.
magic about the epiphany a cubicle as much as it's just withdrawn and solitary, right?
Yes.
And that kind
Exactly
of
right.
space, right? So ask questions that create reflection in people,
Hmm.
and that's where the epiphany will come from. But
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
that's
And
hard
you
to
can
do.
have those. In fact, my friend who gave the talk on Saturday night, he lived in a tent back in his 20s for 4 years, and he would light a fire every night. And for 1,000 nights, he taught himself a different story from folklore and from
Hmm.
different traditions and First Nations and all of that every night for a thousand nights.
So
And
for
then
3.5 years, he would read a different story. Is that how he would do? And then
and then tell
do
it out
nothing
loud
else.
and learn. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that reflection also included the repetition of him saying
Oh yeah,
things.
yeah. Look, this guy's world class. He created this platform at Stanford. He teaches at Cambridge now, and like this is another level. Like, but he went back and did this kind of again, and at the beginning of 2020, spent not all night, but every night he would go for 4 or 5 hours into the woods in the UK for about 101 nights that he did that, to go spend that time quiet, alone, staring into the dark. And sometimes those epiphanies happen there. But help this happen for your team by noticing their progress, making the statements of progress, getting curious about how that progress is happening, unpack what that production function looks like, and they're going to get better. But guess what? You're probably going to pick up a few secrets for yourself. You might come away more inspired yourself than you thought you would.
Right. I bet zero micromanagers create epiphanies. I bet
that's very true.
It's more difficult to be able to do. Okay. For Scott, for you, and for Andrew, who's listening as our producer, and for those of us who joined us over on Substack, we appreciate the comments. Thank you, Pauline Crawford, for reaching out with that kind compliment as well. But we do this every day, and we hope to see you again tomorrow, same time, same bat channel, same bat time.
There you go.
And but with tomorrow's topic of the field note, which we don't have
yet. Yeah,
we'll see you tomorrow.
This is real time. All right, see you, Mikey.
Bye now.